Welcome back to Once Upon Yesterday, the show where we dust off the history books and make the past feel alive. I'm your host, James, and today we are tackling one of the most brutal, dramatic, and consequential wars of the ancient world, the Peloponnesian War. This wasn't just a skirmish. It was a 27-year-long death struggle between Athens and Sparta that reshaped Greece. Think of it like Game of Thrones meets the Cold War, but with more spears and fewer dragons. So grab your virtual hoplite shield, because we're diving deep into the causes, the key players, the battles, and the sheer chaos of this legendary conflict. Before we get into the war itself, we need to understand why these two superpowers were destined to clash. Athens and Sparta were the Coke and Pepsi of ancient Greece, except instead of competing over soda, they were competing over power, ideology, and survival. Athens was the glamorous democracy, a city of philosophers, artists, and naval dominance. They ran the Delian League, which started as an anti-Persian alliance, but slowly turned into an Athenian empire. Picture the U.S. after World War II, setting up military bases everywhere and calling it protection. Meanwhile, Sparta was the ultimate warrior society. No frills, no fancy theaters, just iron discipline and a permanent state of, don't mess with us. They led the Peloponnesian League, a coalition of cities that were either terrified of Sparta or just really annoyed by Athens. The tension had been building for decades. Athens kept expanding, Sparta kept side-eyeing them, and then boom, war breaks out in 431 BCE. But what finally lit the fuse? Every great war needs a flashpoint, and this one came from a place you might not expect, a tiny conflict in modern-day Croatia. See, there was this city called Epidamnus, which was having a civil war. They asked Corinth, Sparta's ally, for help. But then they also asked Corcyra, which was Athens' ally, for help. Long story short, Athens and Corinth ended up in a naval battle. Athens won, and Corinth ran crying to Sparta, screaming, "Athens is out of control. They're going to take over everything." Sparta, already annoyed about Athenian power, called a meeting of their allies. The Corinthians gave this epic speech, basically saying, if we don't stop Athens now, we'll all be their slaves. And Sparta, after some hesitation, agreed. But here's the funny part. Pericles, Athens' top leader, didn't even want war. He just didn't think Sparta would actually do it. It's like when your friend says, "I swear, if you eat my last slice of pizza, I'm going to fight you." And you're like, "Yeah, sure," and proceed to eat that last slice of pizza. And then suddenly, fists are flying. Now, the war itself can be split into three main phases. And the first is called the Achaemenian War, from 431 to 421 BCE. Sparta, led by King Archidamus II, marched into Athenian territory, burning farms and trying to provoke Athens into a land battle. But Athens, under Pericles' strategy, refused to fight. And, instead, they pulled everyone inside their super long walls, the Long Walls, connecting Athens to its port, and let their navy raid Spartan allies. This was basically ancient guerrilla warfare. Sparta had the better army, but Athens had the better ships. It was like a heavyweight boxer versus a nimble fencer. Each side had its strengths and weaknesses, but neither could land a knockout blow. Then, disaster struck. A horrific plague hit Athens in 430 BCE, killing a third of its population, including Pericles himself. Imagine if COVID had wiped out Congress and the president in one go. It would be total chaos. Athens kept fighting, But without Pericles, their leadership became a mess. Meanwhile, Sparta kept burning crops, and Athens kept raiding coasts. It was a brutal stalemate. By 421 BCE, both sides were exhausted, so they signed the Peace of Nicaeus, named after Athenians' lead negotiator. But here's the thing. Nobody actually followed the peace terms. Sparta's allies were mad, Athens' allies were mad, and within a few years, fighting broke out again. This middle phase was full of shifting alliances and betrayals. The most dramatic moment? The Battle of Mantinea in 418 BCE, where Sparta crushed a coalition of rebellious allies. It was like if Texas tried to secede, and the U.S. government sent in the Marines to remind them who's the boss. Athens, meanwhile, was led by Alcibiades, a charismatic, reckless genius who was basically the Troy Bolton of ancient Greece. Handsome, brilliant, but also kind of a troublemaker. He convinced Athens to launch the Sicilian expedition of 415 BCE, a massive invasion of Sicily to cut off Sparta's supplies. Spoiler alert, it was a disaster. Picture this. Athens sends over 200 ships and 40,000 men to conquer Sicily. It's their D-Day moment. Except instead of Normandy, they're attacking Syracuse, a powerful city allied with Sparta. At first, things go okay, until Alcibiades gets recalled to Athens to face trial for sacrilege. Instead of facing judgment, he defects to Sparta, yes, the enemy, and starts giving them military advice. Without him, Athens' generals bungle the siege, Syracuse fights back hard, Sparta sends reinforcements, and so on. The entire Athenian army is trapped, starved, and slaughtered. The few survivors are thrown into stone quarries and left to die. This was Athens' Vietnam, a humiliating, costly defeat that shattered their aura of invincibility. After Sicily, Athens was on the ropes, but they weren't out yet. They rebuilt their fleet and kept fighting. Sparta, now advised by Alcibiades, who had since been kicked out of Sparta for sleeping with the king's wife, classic Alcibiades, took the fight to Ionia, which is in modern-day Turkey. The turning point came when Persia, Greece's ancient enemy, started bankrolling Sparta's navy. Why? Because Persia loved watching Greeks kill Greeks. In 405 BCE, the Spartan admiral Lysander ambushed the Athenian fleet at Agios Potami, capturing 171 out of 180 ships. Athens was now starving, broke, and surrounded. By 404 BCE, they surrendered. Sparta tore down Athens' walls, disbanded its navy, and installed a brutal puppet government called the 30 Tyrants. And just like that, the war was over. Sparta, quote, won, quote, but Greece as a whole was weakened. The war drained resources, shattered alliances, and left the door open for Macedonia, aka Philip II and Alexander the Great, to swoop in decades later. Athens eventually bounced back, but its golden age was over. Sparta? They got arrogant, messed up their own empire, and faded into irrelevance. So what's the lesson here? Maybe that pride, paranoia, and poor diplomacy led to disaster, something we still see in today's geopolitics. Also, if a guy named Alcibiades shows up at your council meeting, maybe don't let him run your army. Just saying. And hey, next time you think your HOA meetings are tense, remember, Athens and Sparta went to war over a bar fight in modern-day Croatia. Well, that's it for today's deep dive into the Peloponnesian War. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or tell a friend who loves history. Next week on One Upon Yesterday, we are going to be covering Cleopatra's PR team because, yes, she was brilliant, but she also knew how to spin a story. Until then, stay curious.